this exciting occasion. There are few among us who have a body of work that is worth being donated to an institution of higher learning. And there are fewer still whose work has helped to create and define social movements and to impact a whole generation. Bell Hooks just happens to be one of those truly unique persons. Bell has spent her career as a teacher, lecturer, social activist, and of course, as you can see from this room, a writer. In 1981, she published her first book, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism. And in asserting that to be a feminist in any authentic sense of the term is to want liberation for all people, female and male, from sexist role patterns, domination, and oppression, it was both revelation and revolution. Its thesis that social justice movements are ingrained with racism and patterns of patriarchy still resonates in today's socioeconomic and political climate, and has become the foundation of a feminist movement which argues for solidarity between genders, between races, and between classes, giving hope that even an educated white male, like myself, can be a feminist. Bell's scholarship and teaching, along with her focus of seeking to create the beloved community for all of us to inhabit, were gifts that she brought with her when she decided to make her move to Berea over a decade ago. And both the college and the town were blessed when the Bell Hooks Institute opened in 2014. Along with her own remarkable talents, Bell and the Bell Hooks Institute have brought numerous scholars, activists, and intellectuals to Berea. Guests have included a wide spectrum of unique thinkers, from local innovative businesswomen to famous actresses like Laverne Cox and Emma Watson, and activists and social critics like Cornel West and Gloria Steinem. Academics, social justice warriors, authors, and others, those who challenge us all to think beyond the current unjust norms of society, have graced this small Kentucky town, opening our minds and our hearts, and we have Bell to thank for that. We are here today to celebrate and to honor the work of an acclaimed intellectual, feminist theorist, cultural critic, artist, and writer. In particular, we are here to celebrate her decision to house her papers in the Berea College Hutchins Library archives, a wonderful continuation of her commitment to bring nationally renowned scholarship and meaningful dialogue to this institution and to the wider community. Already, scholars have reached out to me to express their appreciation for this special gift, which will benefit both individual researchers and teachers who will bring their students to read and discuss the depth and breadth of Bell's work. Bell's archival legacy will be now available here in perpetuity as another key foundational element of our beloved community. Who could think of a better reason than that to celebrate? So thank you, Bell, for bringing revolution and revelation to our community.
Well done. Yes.
Bringing the papers here, why Berea? To be perfectly honest, I can't imagine the life's work of Bell Hooks being housed anywhere else but Berea College, and certainly not anywhere else outside the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Be honest, can you? I know of folks at other institutions around the country who told themselves, and probably Bell too, many times, that her papers belong in Massachusetts, or California, or Georgia. But to know her work, from Ain't I a Woman to feminist theory, to teaching to transgress, to Bone Black, to All About Love, to Belonging, to Appalachian Elegy, it would be unconscionable not to have these papers here, where they will now reside safely for generations to come. Because Bell's writing is rooted in place. It was born here in the hills of Kentucky, in the loamy soil there that grew stately fields of tobacco, wondrous gardens that sustained people rich and poor alike, and stately trees of bur oak and poplar whose stories are for the hearing if you only listen. Her place-based writing was also frankly born amid the white supremacy, the patriarchy, the imperialism, and the cruelty that trampled the dreams of humanity for countless generations, beginning with the Native Americans who had called Kentucky home by another name for centuries. The Trail of Tears, after all, went directly through Bell's Hopkinsville. Having been born and raised in this place has surely tempered Bell as one of this country's foremost public intellectuals. All those good memories and experiences and all those painful ones combined. How could Bell have gone on to write about justice, about equality, about inclusion, had she not first experienced what she calls dominator culture here in the Commonwealth? In returning to Kentucky, Bell has nurtured a community in which she is deeply rooted. And while it's not always easy, Bell persists. She has befriended all peoples of the earth. Here in tiny Berea, born out of a radically inclusive ideal whose relevance is as essential today as it was in the 1850s. Black, brown, and white, queer, bisexual, and straight, she, he, and they, book-educated and those educated by local knowledge, wealthy, middling, and poor, the powerful and the powerless, all of these, born of one blood, are her friends here. I believe, she writes in Belonging, that we can restore our hope in a world that transcends race by building communities where self-esteem comes not from feeling superior to any group, but from one's relationship to the land, to the people, and to the place. To belong, Bell argues, is to feel connected, balanced, self-restraint, generous, mutual, inclusive, and egalitarian. She belongs to Kentucky with its rewards and its challenges. She belongs at Berea College, where she helps us prompt a confirming smile from our founder as we continue his work. Bell longed to return to her natal Commonwealth, called back home to the Kentucky hills. Her coming home is a model for so many who through displacement and placelessness reflect neither a knowledge or an attachment to one tiny patch of earth, as James Still says, loved more than any other earth. That her writings, her papers, and her journals have come along with her is as it should be. They too now have a home for the ages. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. That's pretty good. They did some better speeches today. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here today as we recognize the official gift of the Bell Hooks Papers as part of our archival history at Berea College. Almost 14 years ago, I met my spiritual sister, Bell, as she moved back to Kentucky, to Berea, to become a part of our community. Since that time, I have spent much time with Bell, discussing the things that matter most to us, the state of our spiritual and natural worlds, our love for our families and our Southern African-American roots, our deep love of books, our admiration and appreciation of beautiful men, and most of all, our desire to see the world become a better place for all peoples of the earth. Bell is an unrelenting critic of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist.
All right.
This does not always make her popular. But I've watched as she has spoken and lived her truth. I continue to admire her insistence that those close to her be willing to engage in conversations about feminism, to unpack the problems of patriarchy, to try to live their best lives. I have had the honor of traveling with Bell, and I will never forget our trip to the National Women's Studies Association Conference in Puerto Rico, where Bell gave the keynote address to the largest ever NWSA crowd. From the time we entered the airport, I watched people stand back in awe of Bell and her contribution to their lives and their work. I watched as men and women and those outside the gender binary came to Bell with smiles and tears, thanking her for her words, for changing their lives, for saving their lives, for helping them understand that they were not alone. It was humbling to watch these hordes of people come to Belle to thank her for her work, for her words, for a life lived not for fame or fortune, but to speak hard truths to power, and to provide those voiceless masses with a theoretical understanding of their self-worth written in words they could actually understand. I recall one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite Bell Hooks essays, "Beauty laid bare, aesthetics in the ordinary," that reminds me of my home and those around me who saw beauty in ordinary things. I think of the flowers of my paternal aunt who raised me. Her flowers covered as much of our front yard as my grandfather would allow. I could see her soul work in those flowers. I think about the weeping willow trees I can still see swaying in the breeze on a warm summer day during my childhood. I remember a porcelain water pot that my grandmother prized. Of these moments, Belle writes, there can be a sacred place in everyone's life where beauty can be laid bare, where our spirits can be moved and lifted up by the creation of the presence of a beautiful object. I recall sitting with Belle and Skip Gates in Martha's Vineyard, talking about Belle's papers. Skip insisted that Belle should basically, quote, sell her papers to the highest bidder, but Belle resisted. She wanted her papers to be right here in Kentucky at Berea College, where the least of those could come and work, where all could have access to her words. This is one of the reasons that it is so important to have the Bell Hooks papers at Berea College. For me, having the Bell Hooks papers at Berea College is the classic Bell Hooks engaged pedagogy that she writes about in one of her most quoted works, Teaching to Transgress, Education as the Practice of Freedom. To educate, she writes, as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that anyone can learn. That learning process comes easiest to those of us who teach, who also believe that there is an aspect of our vocation that is sacred, who believe that our work is not merely to share information, but to share in the intellectual growth of our students, to teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. I believe in the sacred vocation of teaching, and what better place for Belle's works to be than Berea College, a place founded upon the ideals of radical abolitionists. So today, as we honor Belle and officially recognize the gift of her papers, I want to thank her for having the courage to speak her truth, to walk to the beat of her own drum, to unapologetically love herself and her people, and to call upon us all to live a life that matters. I look forward to generations of Kentuckians and other seekers who will come here to read Belle's words, to engage in the transformative learning, to teach and to transgress, and to continue their journeys towards self-efficacy. Today, my sister, you can see that your life matters, your words matter, and I am forever grateful to call you my friend.
So beautiful. I got some, thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I first have to thank some people who couldn't be here. First and foremost, my assistant that I had who left me, Barbara Finney. She did so much to make the Institute happen. And so, Barbara, here's our shout out from Berea to you. And of course, you've heard my team speak, because this is a collaborative project between archivists, writer, and a generous administration. Didn't they write beautiful words? Yes. I have been reading Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi, the definitive history of racist ideas in America. He writes long and meaningfully about the fact that when Phyllis Wheatley wrote her poems, nobody white believed that this girl, this black girl, could write. We had a kind of remembrance of that in Hidden Figures, but we saw that little black girl go to the blackboard and do the math that she loved so much. In 1772, a tribunal of 18 white men gathered to quiz Phyllis Wheatley to prove that she could indeed be the author of her words. They wrote, "We whose names are underwritten do assure the world that the poem specified in the following page was, as we verily believed, written by Phyllis, a young Negro girl who was but a few years since brought an uncultivated barbarian from Africa." Wow. This is what we live in as Black women. The constant need to prove ourselves worthy, to make ourselves visible. I have been thinking a lot about Sarah Barton, the Hottentot Venus. White men who bought this Black South African woman, paraded her all around Europe, naked, her buttocks, her everything, for the entertainment and enjoyment of white supremacist people. When President Nelson Mandela took office in 1994, he renewed South Africa's call for Barton's return home. France returned her remains to her homeland in 2002 after a life and afterlife of unceasing exhibitions. She finally rested in peace. That's why I had to play that Rosa Parks song. My feet are tired, but my soul is rested. They cut out her body parts. They exhibited them all over to say, this monstrous beast is not really a woman. And this is what we, as Black females, contend with today. I could not speak of the influence of women in my life without speaking about one of the most influential, the little white woman, Emily Dickinson, who sat in her bedroom and wrote an amazing amount of poems. Some of you may have read the New Yorker piece about her, but she too had no public voice. She was welcomed after her death as a writer of meaning. And now, Dickinson's bedroom can be rented for an hour at a time so people can see what she saw, to see what inspired her. Well, people haven't reached the point where they're trying to rent out an hour in my bedroom. But who knows? I have to pause for a minute to welcome the wonderful archivists, the African American women archivists who've come from Iowa, Georgia, who've come here to celebrate with us. Archivists who would indeed have preferred to be handling those bell hooks papers themselves, but this is my home. Raised in the Black church tradition, and you can remember with me, I remember that point in Sunday service when the preacher would call out in the midst of a carefully crafted sermon, "Can I get a witness?" Such a gesture opened a space in organized, structured, institutional ritual for spontaneous testimony, declarations of faith emerging from personal experience. Deeply confessional, this testimony united textual analysis with lived experience. Suddenly, the previously felt distance between public discourse and private space was disrupted. The intimate stories as subversive narrative was offered as a challenge to both speaker and audience, an expression of faith, but also a test of faith. It was meant to instruct, to guide, to spiritually renew. The call to witness was not the task of a select few. It was a collective responsibility, a shared burden. Black theologian James Cone writes in the introduction to My Soul Looks Back, testimony is an integral part of the Black religious tradition. It is the occasion in which a believer stands before the community of faith in order to give an account of the hope that is in him or her. He emphasizes, quote, that the purpose of testimony is not only to strengthen an individual's faith, but also to build the faith of the community. Importantly then, the personal history gained new meaning when it was offered as nurturance to heighten communal awareness and deepen commitment. I offer these comments to you in the spirit of testimony. Within the Academy, there continues to be concern about the intellectual relevance of personal confession, of testimony. Those of us who are committed to education as the practice of freedom understand the importance of theorizing from different locations, from the experiential as well as the realm of abstract ideas. We come together as a community united by principles, by our passion to know we are seekers. When we are working to embody our politics in the way we live, to live a life that bears witness, our commitment to ending domination, to justice, is expressed in the dailiness of our lives. Such a life protects us from fragmentation, depression, and psychic disintegration. It enables a dedication to truth and a commitment to being honest. Vigilance, critical vigilance, is different from judgment. When we judge, it is to bring closure, to stop interaction. Vigilance encourages acknowledgement that change is a process, that transformation happens in stages. It promotes growth of our capacity to be understanding, compassionate, and forgiving. Cornel West spoke at a conference on Black Power in the 21st century about the need for critical affirmation, engagement in dialectical reciprocity, so that we learn to critique one another in ways that do not disenable. Developing our capacity to love enhances our participation in critical affirmation. This is especially true for marginalized, exploited, and oppressed groups who suffer from internalized racism, sexism, homophobia in ways that make us treat one another harshly. In the eternal now, Paul Tillich reminds us, wisdom is present in students who question the principles behind whatever they are studying and its meaning for their lives. Wise are they who realize both the necessity and the limits of all learning and the superiority of love over knowledge. Can I get a witness? The superiority of love over knowledge. Yet if we consider love to be a power force enabling us to seek our growth and that of others, we need to be more loving. It fascinates me that there's so little talk of love in the Academy. When we love, our sense of what we do with knowledge is given focus and direction. When we love, our political actions, our theory and practice will necessarily assure the character and quality of the justice we seek. To think about love, we also have to think about death. Writing in the cancer journals, lesbian poet, thinker, writer Audre Lorde affirms the ways knowledge of her dying helped illuminate her understanding of the process of transforming silence into language and action, declaring, "In becoming forcefully and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omission became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silence. Of what had I ever been afraid to question or to speak, as I believed could have meant pain or death. But we all hurt in so many different ways all the time, and pain will either change or end. Death, on the other hand, is the final silence." When I first spoke with the archivists who come here yearly, I talked about the fact that my sister Teresa, Valerie is here, Dr. Valerie, younger sister, baby sister, that when our sister Teresa died unexpectedly, it broke my heart. I can't even talk about it without feeling that heartache, because she was emblematic of the type of black woman we've been talking about. Invisible, silent, prey to addiction and violence, all of those things, and bad health that led her to death way too soon. It seems very telling that in the wake of her near-deathness, they took out her voice box. When we last saw her, she was not able to speak. Her hands were strapped down. It was such a sad representation of the silencing that black women have known all our lives. Her death led me to think deeply about my own legacy, about the fact that so many black writers, male and female, have gone to dying without having taken care of their work. You know, we live in the cognitive dissonance of domination, because on one hand we can talk about imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, but then on the other hand, we're surprised when the white people don't want to take care of our work, don't want to praise it and husband it and hoard it as they do so many other thinkers and writers. I am not a person who likes to hoard things. I'm one of those people that many times has to dig through the trash to find my paycheck. I tend to like spaces of greater emptiness. So it was a great challenge to me to begin to think about my papers. And of course, there were those Ivy League schools that were saying, sell us your papers or Skip. Skip is so rough. Belle, you only think you want some ordinary people to be touching your shit. I'm like, Skip, I know what I'm about. But the person who really made me think about the value of archives is sitting here, Anna Niemeyer, Zarnik Niemeyer. I was apologizing to her because on the video I lost her last name. Anna came from the Cassandra Voss Center in De Pere, Wisconsin. She and the director, Carlin, came here with Kurt Voss to check out the building and to check out Berea to see if it would be a good place for me to have the Bell Hooks Institute. Anna may not remember this. Every step of the way they helped me in the snow. We loaded books, we loaded bookcases. When they came to the Laverne Cox hosted opening, Anna goes upstairs and there is the black baby doll in her rocking chair, the doll that I have written so much about as a child, how much it meant to me that my mother found this black doll. Of course, she's alive today because I never played with her. Anna took one look at the doll and tears came to her eyes and she said, oh my God, the black baby doll, the doll that we've read so much about. And I had at that moment, that light bulb moment, where I saw in that how much archives and artifacts matter, how much they mean to somebody who's been reading something in a book, and then there it is. There is the reality of it right before you. So I invite all of you to come sometimes, if you haven't come, to the Bell Hooks Institute. Many of you don't value all of the things in your life. Many of us in Berea have recently lost friends, acquaintances, and colleagues to cancer, AIDS, or unexplained catastrophe, and we are aware of death in our midst. That it is, as the slaves once said, an old friend. To know this is to know that it is important how we are living right now. Many of you have been drifting for years because you have so incorporated into your thinking and values the idea that life takes place in the future, in the real world. Remember that the life you have must take place where you are, in the present. My mother was fond of saying to us as children, life is not promised, words which usually prefaced her urging us to take some action we were reluctant to take. It is a radical political response to living in modernity to courageously acknowledge the reality of death. It is the courageous acknowledging of my own death that has led to the protection of my legacy, of my decision to give and to work with my papers here at the Hutchins Library. I am thankful to the archivist who persuaded me that, Belle, really your papers need to be in the library, not in the Bell Hooks Institute. For those of you who are interested, there are facsimiles in the Bell Hooks Institute, but it is Rachel Watts who very much pushed and pushed for me to hand over these papers to the library. Beth and Crescent are both professors here who brought their students to work with the papers. They're the first group of people to handle the papers themselves, and I had hoped that there was more time so that they could express to you how much it meant to them to try to read the tiny writing of bell hooks. So let us leave with the thought that life is not promised. It is a radical political response to courageously acknowledge the reality of death, to consider death that we may live with as much joy and integrity as possible, that we may live in a way that bears witness. As many of us walked this past year in rallies for freedom, for lesbian and gay rights, walking to bear witness that gay life must be lived openly without shame. Remember all of those who cannot walk with us. Remember who you are, bear witness. Thank you. In Berea. I'm here for the duration. People get so upset when I say that, but it's my choice. Shall we have a little short Q&A before moving on to the reception? Let me see the time. Who's got a question? A burning question?
I do.
Your name?
Okay, so my name is Chase McCoy, and I'm a sophomore here at Berea. And so lately, in my Education 150 class, we've been taught about the wide range of biases and how we can unpack them and to fully understand why we and the society around us has caused these biases in today's world. So about me from afar, I'm a 6'5" tall white male, but at home I didn't even realize what an advantage that was to be a white male and what a white male was. But if you get to know who I am from afar, I'm a feminist, I'm a realist, and more importantly, I'm a gay male. But now more than ever, I'm scared because I've known from childhood that I was made to be a teacher, yeah? And, but now more than ever, how can I expect to go into a school and expect a job and expect respect due to my sexuality, and how can I teach adolescents to impact their biases towards the gay community when they've already tuned me out because their teacher is gay? How do I deal with a child who refuses to give me respect because of my sexuality while trying to help them themselves unpack their biases towards me and my people?
That was a bit of a speech, but I can handle it.
I'm sorry.
I think we are called at this moment in our nation's history and in our lives to remember the good, to remember the fact. I just was on a conversation with Bettina Love, a black lesbian theorist, married to Chelsea, mother of 2 children, who does work on hip hop. I'm going to bring her to the Institute next year. She does hip hop pedagogy. We did this conversation in white supremacist De Pere, Wisconsin. The world there loved it. Not the world of those who are haters, but the world of those who want to see a different world coming into being. We did together a talk. I did a talk for children. I sold more children's books there than ever in my life, 4,000. I had all kind of questions from 8th graders. Yes, there are going to be haters. Yes, there is going to be suffering. But there's also going to be joy. If we focus on the suffering, we can forget. I mean, one thing that Foucault taught me Michel Foucault, the French critical theorist, there is no closed system. There's always a gap. And our task as revolutionaries and resistors is to find that gap. So don't be dismayed. Be excited about the work that you have to do to find that gap. I think that that is another way that we remember and we bear witness. Another question? Yes, your name? Looking right at your sister.
My name is Talia. I have been I don't know, I'm young.